Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. Back with more vibe for all you. Yes, I. And this one is called The Origin of the Swiss Nation, Europe's most diverse country. Huh. I didn't know it was the most diverse country. Well, this is going to be interesting. I want to see how they say the vibe and thing. You know what I mean? This the most diverse country. You know, real quiet place it seems, but diversity is not what I was looking for it to be. So I want to learn something on this. Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer.
How did Switzerland become Europe's most diverse country? And we're talking about diversity in just about every sense of the word, as in terms of religion, ethnicity, language, and culture. Switzerland is quite distinct from nearly every other European country, with perhaps the exceptions of Belgium or Bosnia, as the vast majority are fairly homogeneous ethno-states, either due to assimilation or expulsion of ethnic minorities in the past couple centuries. Not so with Switzerland, however, as this infamously neutral country is well known for its avoidance of internal and international conflicts, being one of the only European countries to avoid bloodshed during World War II, and is fiercely committed to a policy of nonviolence, non-interventionism, and a cohesive national identity as one of the first modern countries in the world to embrace democracy. But how could such a seemingly hermit-style nation have maintained its status as the political bedrock of Europe while surrounded by such chaotic and destructive conflicts
Yeah, I want to
and
know.
such a hodgepodge population? In order to look at the origin of the Swiss nation
Ooh.
and identity, if there even is such a thing, we must go back to the ethnogenesis of the dominant ethno-linguistic groups in the region, and as with Austria and other regions of the Alps, the Celts were the first modern
The
Indo-European people
Celts.
to have settled in this region, subsequently expanding to many other regions, including northern Italy, Germany, France, Iberia, and of course the British Isles, with the following waves of migration washing away the original Celtic tribes of the Alps region. This was mostly due to the expansion of the Romans, as the Alpine region was quickly conquered and acted as a bit of a
There
buffer
goes the
region
Romans
between the
again.
Italian peninsula and the raiding
You are
Germanic
a
tribes to the
massive
north.
superpower.
And another pre-Indo-European people of the Alps, the Rhaetians, were also assimilated, with the population that evolved afterwards referred to as the Rhaeto-Romance peoples, as a hybrid of Rhaetian, Roman, and Celtic background. Being on the forefront of the empire, the area that would become Switzerland was quite divided between Latin and Germanic tribes, especially after the migration period during the fall of Rome, and over many generations they evolved to become the modern people groups we see there today. After the fall of Rome, the Germanic Franks would establish a dynasty encompassing nearly all of Germany, France, Switzerland, the Low Countries, and northern Italy, although this would eventually split into East, West, and Middle Francia, with the eastern portion evolving into the Holy Roman Empire, which was certainly not a continuation of the Romans, although it did encompass the bulk of West Central Europe, including northern Italy. The Holy Roman Empire was a conglomeration of a multitude of different nations, many of which had their own regional monarchs, such as the Kingdom of Burgundy, Kingdom of Bohemia, Kingdom of Italy, and Kingdom of Germany, and was anything but a unified country from a political, national, or ethnic standpoint, gradually losing unity until it dissolved completely, with many independent houses forming in the Alpine region. These German, French, and Italian-speaking houses and other minor powers would coalesce into the Old Swiss Confederacy, one of the oldest republics of the modern age, and as a center of the Reformation was very clearly differentiated from other late medieval European states. This confederacy would become the Helvetic Republic, or Res Publica Helvetica as it was known in Latin, after the French invaded at the end of the 18th century, and would remain nominally under French influence for a couple of decades, with Napoleon implementing several pro-French laws and policies in Switzerland, leading to a revolution that would culminate in Switzerland evolving into the modern confederation we see today. But what exactly does this confederation entail? Switzerland is still quite unique in Europe today for being a confederacy and a direct democracy, with each territory, or canton of Switzerland, having representation in the federal government in proportion to its population, while still retaining a high degree of sovereignty for local authorities. The territorial divisions are neither ethnically nor religiously based, but rather evolved from canton borders since the 15th century, and the Constitution is quite similar to that of the US in regards to the fact that all laws not specifically designated to the federal government are the responsibility of the individual cantons. One might think that neighboring Liechtenstein would make a prime candidate for a Swiss canton, considering its border with Switzerland and extremely small size. But in the past, the small principality was actually much closer with Austria, and it wasn't until after World War I that the microstate finally opened up to Switzerland
That's
from a
beautiful.
political and economic standpoint. In the past and up to the present day, there are still very hard borders between the different ethno-linguistic groupings of Switzerland, as although the country is very heavily integrated, the individual communities still retain their original languages, cultures, and religions, with intermarriage between communities being rare, although increasing in recent years. Switzerland today is split into
See, you could live and still keep your culture and be cool. It's happening there, as far as we know. I mean, but that's the point. You know what I mean? They keep their culture, but they're still cool. You know, and they start to enter marriage stuff going on there. But you know, something tells me people are gonna still keep their little cultures going. And I keep saying little, but you know, they're gonna keep the cultures going. You know, could still respect stuff. You know what I mean? You don't have to change people.
four main geographical regions divided by ethno-linguistic affiliation.
It would make a marriage more exciting if the two people are different. So the whole through life you learn from each other. You know what I'm saying? When you marry the same type of person, it's the same type of vibe, you know, that stuff for me that would get boring. But then again, I'm the type of person that want to learn everything I possibly can.
With the German portion in the north and central areas of the country clearly being the largest, encompassing most cantons and around 3/4 of the land area. Historically, ethnic Germans made up roughly 2/3 of the nation's population. However, in recent years, this has shrunk a bit, as only around half of the country is made up of native Swiss Germans, although in absolute numbers, the Swiss German population has still grown exponentially. The Swiss Germans are not exactly similar to those from Austria or Germany, however, with there being quite a few differences between their dialect and standard German spoken to the north, although both are quite mutually intelligible, meaning speakers can understand each other. Next is the French portion of Switzerland, historically making up around a fifth of the Swiss population, and the dialect of French spoken in this region isn't really French at all, but rather Franco-Provençal or Arpitan, which in its native form is quite distinct from standard French. Although in recent years, French has been swiftly replacing these indigenous dialects spoken in Switzerland. One of the most interesting indigenous peoples of Switzerland would definitely be the Romansh, a racial Romance ethnic group who previously numbered no more than 1% of the population, native to the canton of Grisons, or Graubünden as it's known in Swiss German, and are closely related to the Latins and Friulians in neighboring Italy. Through ethnic and cultural assimilation, this group has shrunk to a fraction of its size, currently numbering a paltry 50,000 or less, with many not seeing an advantage in learning Romansh, which is not intelligible with any other language, although there has been a limited cultural revival in recent years. The remainder of the Swiss population is made up of the Lombard-speaking Italians in the southern canton of Ticino and elsewhere, making up the third largest group in Switzerland, although more recent immigration from Italy has greatly boosted their numbers, with an easy 40% of Italian-speaking residents of Switzerland being born in Italy, as opposed to the French and German communities, with only around 10% being foreign-born. Although these various ethno-linguistic groups of Switzerland may have a strong sense of heritage from their respective neighboring countries of Germany, France, and Italy, there is still a strong sense of shared heritage among the native Swiss citizens, and I imagine that, genetically speaking, these three communities would have a smaller degree of genetic distance between them than, say, German speakers from Bern and Berlin, or French speakers from Geneva and Paris, or Italian speakers from Lugano and Rome.
Wow, they just converged.
Say that someone has Swiss heritage explains their national but not ethnic background, as they could be of any one of the four main ethno-linguistic groups, which is why in the Swiss diaspora, the different ethnic groups typically assimilate into their respective language grouping outside of the country. For instance, Swiss Germans largely integrated into the German-American community in the United States. Not only is Switzerland quite diverse from an ethno-linguistic standpoint, but also by religion, as historically Switzerland was pretty evenly divided between Protestants and Catholics, with the country being a patchwork of Protestant and Catholic majority regions with seemingly little rhyme or reason, and similarly to the ethnic distribution, there are usually quite clear geographic divisions between these different religious areas, with intermixing historically being quite rare. The Swiss Germans are pretty split, although Catholics outnumber Protestants at a ratio of 4 to 3. And unlike in France, the Swiss French are actually majority Protestant, with a ratio to Catholic of 2 to 1, while the Swiss Italians are overwhelmingly Catholic, similar to the situation in Italy, although there is a small Italian Protestant community in Brigalia in the south. Although Switzerland has declined advances into the European Union, it is a part of the European Free Trade Association, along with others such as Norway, Iceland, and
They stay out of the politics, or the politics.
States who have since shifted to the EU, although the country still maintains a high degree of integration with the rest of Western Europe as a part of the Schengen area, an agreement that allows freedom of movement throughout most of the region, meaning the borders are open between Switzerland and all of its respective neighbors, which has caused a massive surge in immigration in the past few decades, notably from Southern and Eastern Europe. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Spain, Portugal, and Italy migrated to Switzerland since the 1980s, mostly for economic reasons, and since the 1990s, a very large community has formed from expats from the former states of Yugoslavia, who are either economic migrants or refugees fleeing the chaos of the Balkan Wars. And these two groups alone make up the majority of the foreign-born Swiss population, and some estimate that nearly 1 in 10 Swiss permanent residents today have at least some ancestry from Eastern Europe, including the Balkans. Other than these two regions of Eastern and Southern Europe, there's been a large migrational pull to Switzerland from all around the world, and those who can be described as belonging to the native people of Switzerland make up around 75% of the population, with around 1 in 4 being immigrants. However, those with at least some
immigrants,
full
man,
or partial foreign background
we everywhere.
make up over a third of the Swiss population, but this also includes German, French, and Italian immigrants who are pretty much completely assimilated into the various regional cultures they migrated to. Around 6 to 7% of the Swiss population is of non-European ancestry, mostly those from the Middle East and Africa, with some of the largest being Turks, Arabs, and Sri Lankan Tamils. And interestingly, the patterns of migration for the various ethno-linguistic geographic divisions today largely mirror that of their neighboring countries. For instance, most Turks live in the German-speaking Switzerland, while most Arabs and Southern Europeans settle in the French or Italian-speaking regions. In recent times, religious adherence has dropped significantly, with around a third of the population belonging to the Catholic Church, a third belonging to various Protestant churches, but mostly the Swiss Reformed Church, and another third belonging to another religion or being irreligious. So who exactly is Swiss? Well, the Swiss are Protestant, the Swiss are Catholic, the Swiss are French, the Swiss are German, the Swiss are Italian. The Swiss identity is one of the most well-known in Europe. It is clearly one of the most diverse.
It's a hodgepodge of people.
So for today's poll, let me know which Swiss community you'd like to learn more about, i.e. the French, Germans, Italians, Romansh, or others, and be sure to let me know your thoughts on the origin and evolution of Switzerland. And as always, this has been Mason.
Wow. There's all these people living there, you know what I mean? And they've been relatively peaceful this whole time. So, can be done. That's pretty cool, though. I got to look for other places in the world that are like that, because it just couldn't be that area that's like that. There's got to be other places in the world that are like that. So I'm going to look for some so we could put it up here. So we could live together and chill out and take. We could do it. But anyway, man, keep watching. Okay, that box down there, click on that. The bubble up here, click on that, I'll leave the link to this video in the description. Go check that out. Check out the channel. Check out the man rapping there and thing, see what he have for you to watch. Check him out, man. This stuff is quite interesting. This I didn't know at all. So this is something I totally just learned, because I've always been interested in Switzerland, and just to check it out and take and see what the vibe is, and I did. A small portion of it, I would like to delve into the different ethnic groups and see what it's like and what the culture is like there. That would be pretty nice to do. So who knows, maybe have some video with that, you know what I mean? But in the meantime, take care of each other. Cool runnings.